What's up, everyone? Hey, it's just a little special episode of Second Chance Podcast here. Just had Hurricane Helena roll through our area, and then on the East Coast, central down. And it has affected our friends and over in Western North Carolina and other parts of Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina, Florida. Um, Particularly, there's a lot of attention being um, given to our friends over in Western North Carolina right now. They are absolutely digging out of a disaster that hopefully many of you will never have to experience. So, but along with that, it creates just a buzz of what does, why is it the help there? What's going on? Why does it take so long? So I had Billy Ferguson, who's retired Director of Public Safety from Franklin County, he's a past colleague of mine, that I just had him on. We talked for about 40 minutes on what it looks like when a disaster happens in a local level. Now, we're out of Virginia. We're going to talk you through what Virginia looks like. We're going to talk you through kind of what some of the donation and some of the just the process of why sometimes you want to give and sometimes it's hard to give during these times. It's because the folks that are getting it have to be able to receive it and receive it positively. So we speak to a lot of that. This is a time when this may fall and may hit some emotions because everybody wants to help, and I get that, and I totally understand that. Billy is someone that you can lean on. He's also going to talk about leaning on your local fire chief and your local public safety officials that can help you navigate some more of this as well. Hope it helps. That's the whole goal of me doing this special episode, was just to try to provide some help and increase some communication on why processes are where they are, and just try to help. I'm just like everyone else. I felt like I needed to help in some fashion, and I understand the processes from working in that industry, and I understand the frustrations from working in that industry. And I just wanted to help by just trying to increase our communication and let all of you folks know what it looks like when a disaster strikes. Hope it helps. Let me know what you think. Praying for everybody involved and sending nothing but positive vibes your way. All right, team, on today's episode of the Second Chance Podcast, special edition. This one is being generated out of need and out of some events that's going on. We're experiencing Hurricane Helena just rolled through our area here in Virginia, and our friends south of us down in North Carolina, South Carolina, parts of Georgia, Florida has all been affected with this. So I have reached out to an old friend of mine. We go back. I met this dude in 1988 or 89. Gonna tell both of our ages here. And he was someone that when I walked into public safety, he was the captain of the volunteer rescue squad. And he served as a mentor for me over the years through my EMT and public safety career. And then we've remained friends through my law enforcement. And even to this day, Billy Ferguson is with us, and he is a 43-year public safety veteran. And I'm excited. He's going to tell you more about him, but he was a guy that inspired me to kind of chase that career in as an EMT and try to further into the advanced ALS, as we call it, paramedic, cardiacs, intermediates, whatever your state calls them. This is one of the guys that helped inspire me to kind of chase that dream when I was 15, 16 years old. So today, what we're going to talk about is there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise on why I can't ship my water in, why I can't volunteer, what does help look like, why ain't the federal government here, where's the state, why is it a local guy, what is going on? And Billy is one of these guys that has experienced all aspects of responding to events of that get designated as a disaster. And it's more than just saying, oh, there's a flood. There's a process that goes through, and I've invited Billy on here today to help us talk about this and just help us clear out the noise and just have a great conversation about what this process looks like. So, Billy, thank you for taking time out of your busy day to come on here and just help our guests and the rest of the world that's going to find this podcast through future incidents that they're going to Google hurricane, why, this, that, and the other, and hopefully this content will be living out there for them to learn from. So, Billy, welcome. Glad you're here, brother.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Man, you said in 43 years. That sounds like a really, really long time, and I must be really, really old.
But, I didn't tell him you got started when you was 10.
Yeah. Right there. Thank you, Jeff. And I have been involved in public safety 43 and a half years. I remember walking into the local volunteer rescue squad on June 4th, 1980. Walking in there, and I was 2 days short of graduating from high school, and walked in there, and I guess I'd always had a little interest in this kind of work, going back to the old emergency days with Johnny Gage and Roy DeSoto, and doing that, and starting about the 9th or 10th grade is when I really started getting interested in it. But at that time, it was in this part of the state. It was all volunteer organizations, so I never had any kind of inkling that I can make a living at doing this. So once, as I went through high school, I wanted to be in fire and EMS, emergency man. Oh, then it was just fire and EMS. I don't even know if emergency management existed then, or at least not in our little corner of the state there. I wanted to go to college to be believe it or not, and I don't even know if you know this, but I went to college to be a school teacher, and I wanted to be a school teacher and a basketball coach. That's what I went to college for. And then April of my senior year, I got a job at a local fast food restaurant, and one of the guys there that I work with was a volunteer with the local rescue squad, and me and him quickly became friends. And you know how it was back in those days. You may go to the call on the ambulance, or you may go on your private car. And when he went on the private car, I liked to go with him. And so I would ride with him a lot of times, and we got to hanging out at the building. And I thought, well, this is kind of super cool. So, things just progressed from there. And I ended up joining the rescue squad and working my way up. At that time, it was if you were less than 18, you had to be a member of the junior rescue squad, and between 18 and 21, you could be a junior or a senior. And even though I was 18 at that time, I had turned 18 in April of that year of 1980. I decided I wanted to join the junior side, because that's where all my buddies were at. So I joined that, and they actually got to be, I think, the second or third year I was there, I was elected to be the junior captain of the organization. And when you turned 21, you had to move to the senior side of the crew, and I moved to that as a member, and end up, I was in that process between my junior and senior. I'd gotten up to my EMT and had that, and I remember, the first time, even before I had my EMT, I know you remember Kelvin Pruitt that was there. I remember seeing Kelvin Pruitt with his uniform on and that EMT patch, and I was thinking, man, if I could ever just get that. Yeah. So I got my EMT, and then, at that time in our area, BLS was all it was, unless you lived in a metropolitan area that they didn't really have that, any advanced life support.
For the folks that are listening, BLS, basic life support, you're just providing a little more than first aid, but you're not able to do IVs and breathing, advanced, what we call breathing techniques, like where they put the tube down the throat. Just speaking very layman here for the folks that's going to listen to this, but that's what Billy's talking about, BLS. It's basic life support, but it's a step above bandaging and first aid that you might learn as a lifeguard or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. And at that time in Virginia, you had your EMT, emergency medical technician, and you went to what they called a shock trauma technician. That's no longer certification in Virginia, but it kind of got into starting IVs or intravenous medications to replace blood loss, and also as an avenue to give certain pharmaceutical treatments. And we had about 2 or 3 different drug interventions we could give. And then the next step up at that time was called a cardiac technician. At that time, they gave you a few more toys in your toolbox, more drugs that you could give for different things, cardiac meds, meds for overdoses, meds for diabetes, stuff like that. And you also learn to read a cardiac monitor. That was probably the hardest part I had of all of my things, learn how to read that cardiac monitor. And then I actually stopped there and stayed there for about 3 years. And I remember another gentleman that was a paramedic here at that time. He had gotten his paramedic through the first paramedic class. And at that time, I kind of like, well, I'm not going to go any further. I'm just going to stop right here. And at one time, it even crossed your mind that I'll drop back to an EMT. And I still get to run the calls. I still get to do the fun stuff. And I don't really want all this liability of going higher. And I remember me and him having a conversation, and he told me, if you ever let it drop back, you'll regret it the rest of your life. And so that kind of stuck with me. And I went and got my paramedic, and I got my paramedic in, I believe it was June or July of '86. I know it was '86, and I think it was June or July. And I still hold that certification as a paramedic. And along the way, I had several jobs, I call them. And in 1990, July of 90, I got hired as a career paramedic in Franklin County, Virginia. And ironically, I was the very first paramedic that was hired. In March,
so don't just praise, don't just kind of jump over that. You're the first public safety. You were hired as the first paid paramedic in Franklin County.
Right. Yeah. And so in March of that year, the local governing body made a commitment to hire 4 paid, or careers, we've always referred to them, providers at their March monthly meeting. And I was fortunate enough to apply for that job, apply for one of those 4 jobs. And I got one of them. And just for coincidence, the way the interview dates were set up, mine was just first.
Yeah.
It wasn't that I had any more training than anybody else or was any smarter than anybody else. It was just the first one. And I was hired. Then the second one was hired a couple weeks afterwards. And then the third and fourth ones were hired about 3 months afterwards. And stayed there until April 1st of this year.
I was going to say, you progressed through your time there as you probably went in as what would be a senior paramedic or somewhere in that because of your experience level, but you ultimately rose to be the director.
Yep.
You ultimately you retired as a director of public safety there in Franklin. And how long did you serve as director?
I was director for 6.5 years. I assumed the directorship on July 1st of 2017. I'm sorry, June 1st of 2017. And I retired officially April 1st of 2024. So it was a little over 6.5 years.
6.5. So we're going back from 80 until what, this year?
This year, yeah.
1980 this year. So, we tell you all that for the folks listening. We tell you all that because, I tried to, when we're going to have someone's going to speak to something that is this, what can be sensitive of an issue. I wanted to have someone on here who knows what we're talking about. And what started this, just for all the listeners that knows, that as I scroll and as I talk and as I listen to different folks, is there is just a lot of congestion. There's a lot of confusion. I screenshotted Billy a post that I had seen earlier about people complaining about how donations are being turned away during these folks' times of needs and just different noise. And sometimes it just creates a negative atmosphere for everyone, especially when you're a responder trying to help, and then especially when you're the people that need help. And my question, Billy, is when you get into this situation, when you have this event, this disaster event, what does that look like from asking for help from that local level all the way up to where the federal designations. And I'll plug in a couple things from just where I do some business coaching and things along those lines, where part of our service area has there's been some designations for some of the counties just to get federal assistance or whatever. But that just didn't happen because of whatever. There was a process. And I'd love to hear you kind of walk us through if this happened in Franklin County. Billy, as the Director of Public Safety, what does that look like?
Yeah, Jeff, let me regress a little bit back to my duties as Director of Public Safety. As part of that duties, all that stuff spun out, not just EMS, but the fire, emergency management, hazardous materials, and all that. And in Virginia, the emergency manager is actually or the emergency coordinator is either the county administrator or the city manager. But most of the time that's delegated down to either fire chief or director of public safety, depending on how your system is set up. So that was spun down to me, and I did get to manage several large incidents. The derecho, which came before I was director, but I was placed in a position to manage that. I managed a lot of people heard about the reporters that were shot live on TV. I managed that. Hurricane, I believe it was Francis Michael. I was in on. So you're spot on. It's with everything there is a process, and one thing that I think this goes back to in all my career, I've never taken a class that when they ask about what are some of the things that we could do to improve the outcomes, I've never said in one that communications wasn't somebody brought up and broached that subject. So I think I've heard that a lot. I think I've said it a lot. And I think that while it's all well intentions, a lot of it is breakdowns in communications. So the first thing that I think about is going back to Katrina. When Katrina came about, all emergencies, no matter how small or how big, or local emergencies. In Virginia, if we had a tornado come through my jurisdiction right now, that is a Franklin County, Virginia problem. It ain't a Commonwealth of Virginia problem. It's not a state problem. I mean, a state is not a national problem. It is a Franklin County, Virginia problem. Until the county reaches out and says, "Hey, we need some help here," and that starts out by what we call a declaration of emergency. Local declaration of emergency is what it's actually called. Sometimes that'll be interchanged with a declaration of disaster and a federal disaster. All that spins up, but it starts out as a local emergency, a declaration of a local emergency. So when I was director, there's different ways that different localities do that. But what I did that worked very well for me, it was nothing I invented. It was just following other folks and watching them do things, was always done a lot of prep work for that. So if they were calling for 14 inches of snow next week, I would start preparing for that this week, even though it may have been 50 degrees outside. So what I would do was I kept a declaration always there on my desk. So at that point, all I had to do was walk across the street to our county administrator. He would sign his name to it. I'd bring it back and lay it back on my desk. And when it came time to pull the trigger on that, all I had to do was put a date on it. And it was at that time, it officially became a local declaration of emergency. And when I did that, when I put that date on it, I would then send it up to our region of the Virginia Department of Emergency Management. We were in what they call Region 6. I would send that up to them. And at that point, officially, it was Franklin County was under a declaration of emergency, a local declaration of emergency. And all that filters up through your regional coordinator for the Department of Emergency Management. He would look at it, he would sign it, he would send it on up to the state, and eventually up to the governor's office. And if you have enough of those going into the governor's office from different localities, because a lot of times what would happen in this, Jeff, is if it was snowing here or it was raining here, it was probably raining in adjoining counties too. So I may call up my counterpart in another county and say, hey, what's it look like in your county? We're thinking about pulling the trigger on this declaration of emergency tonight. Are you thinking the same thing? And they may say yeah or no. So most of the time we get these things coordinated, and it'd be 5 or 6 of them going at a time. Now, there are differences to that. The one we had with the shooting, it was an isolated incident to Franklin County. So, with that, it still was a local declaration of emergency, but it didn't get up to the point of being a state emergency or a federal emergency. So once so much of that goes into the governor's office, then the governor, at his will, can declare a state of emergency. And at that point, each one of these levels go up. It frees up resources for you. It changes the rules of the game. If you look at the Commonwealth of Virginia laws, you'll find volumes of books out there that tell different laws out there. Once a local declaration of emergency is signed and sent up, those volumes of books now down to about 30 pages of books. An example, if Franklin County Public Safety wanted to go out and purchase a bulldozer, you're looking at a couple $100,000. You'd have to do an RFP. You'd have to get quotes in. You'd have to do interviews on that stuff. And it may be a 6 or 7 month process. If you had a declaration of emergency and I need a bulldozer, I can just go buy that bulldozer. So it negates a lot of your procurement laws at that time. It also, once the state approves the declaration, it opens up a possibility of recouping some of your money that's spent. An example of that would be in Hurricane Michael. Our county spent several $1,000s, and there's a threshold set. And that threshold currently is $1.84 if it's a statewide disaster. That's per capita, $1.84 per capita. And if it's a local countywide disaster, let's just say it was a hazmat spill, it's let me look at my notes here. It's $4. It's $4.60 per capita if it's that. So once you get past that threshold, you take the population. The population of Franklin County is about 56,000. So you multiply 56,000 times $1.86. That gives you the figure of costs that are associated with that one event. So with the rain like it is now, if we had declared a state of emergency in Franklin County, for us to be able to recoup any funds back, we'd had to pass that threshold. Well, sometimes that threshold just seems way out of reach, because for Franklin County, that threshold was up around $400,000. $400,000 is a lot of money. Now remember, you could only recoup money that was spent specifically for that storm. So if we had an ambulance that had 2 people on it, we had 6 ambulances, that was 12 people working, we couldn't get none of their salaries back. But if we called in people, then we could get it back. So if you had road crews that were out working, it's their normal work, and you couldn't recoup their income, you couldn't recoup the gas for that truck. But if you called additional staffing in, or maybe you extended the hours from 8 hours to 24 hours, then whatever you spent specifically on that storm, you could get a percentage of that back. So for Hurricane Michael, we got $36,000 back. Now, a way that you can do that, a lot of people, and I see a lot of counterparts and around not just Virginia, but other states, is they don't want to go that route because in their minds, they believe they will never get to that threshold. And getting to that threshold takes some work. You've got to keep every receipt. You've got to do record keeping like you would not believe. I mean, an example of that is if you went ahead and took a chainsaw and cut down a tree, you just can't cut down a tree. You have to put that I used a Husqvarna chainsaw. It had an 18-inch blade, and here's the GPS coordinates of that tree. Lots and lots of record keeping. But it can be done. What we always did was just put our receipts literally in a folder. Every one of them we just throw in that folder. And then once you get that declaration of disaster and the governor signs off, they actually send people in to help you, or you can hire additional help that you can count off of getting that money up. Now, how do you get to that threshold? Well, in Virginia, there was 3 different pots of money that you could count toward that threshold. One was local monies that was spent by the locality. They'd done their own assessment, their public assistance assessment there. We never, ever got anywhere near that threshold. The second part was state police. The state police, you could, even though they had to file their own paperwork, you could count. So if the state police assigned to Franklin County did $100,000 worth of work, well, that didn't meet the threshold. Well, let's just say the Department of Public Safety did $100,000. So now we're at $200,000. Let's say the threshold was $300,000 or $400,000. The one that always pushed Franklin County over was VDOT. You can count the Department of Transportation in there. And when they're out there clearing debris, clearing roads, it rolled up real quick. So now if your threshold was 300, state police did 100,000, local done 100, but VDOT come in and done 300. Now what you filed on $600,000, and so or $500,000. So that's what would always push you up. But there's a tremendous amount of record keeping in there, and even with that, you're looking at 2 to 3 years for reimbursement. It's not something that you're gonna turn it in today and you're gonna get it right off. But going back to how that spans up, so once it gets to the state level, and then the state pushes it to the federal level. And the federal level has a threshold just like the local did, just like the state did. And once it gets to that federal level, if it's over that threshold, like the flooding here with Hurricane Helena, you've got North Carolina, you've got Virginia, you've got Tennessee, you've got Georgia. At that time, this president will issue a declaration of disaster. And that's under the Stafford Act. If you're familiar with the Stafford Act, that's where all that comes. And now that frees up other resources. So now, I just heard today that the president's activated 1,000 active duty military to go to Asheville, North Carolina. Well, he's the only person who could do that. Now, the governor could have sent National Guard, but only the president can send. Only the president can send in FEMA teams. So once you get it spun up to that level, then it opens up a lot of resources that are coming to you, which can be is great, but it also creates another set of concerns you have to deal with. We used to do a lot of tabletop planning, and one of the things we talked about was, okay, if this event happens, then we're gonna call X city, and they're gonna send us, the cavalry. Well, just think about when it sends you the cavalry. Where are you going to house these people at? How are you going to feed these people? How are you going to wash their clothes? You've got to have all that in there. So one of the things that happens there too is in the what you sent me, and I've seen a lot of it too, and I've seen a lot of it on social media. The one big one is there's a gentleman on there posting about a helicopter, and a local fire chief threatened to arrest him if he was doing all this stuff. So again, it goes back to communications. And I'm speaking again here for the Commonwealth of Virginia. In the Commonwealth of Virginia, any disaster like that, the local fire chief or the local senior fire officer is where the buck stops with any disaster. That's in code. That's codified in the Code of Virginia. I don't know if North Carolina's the same way, but it probably is. But everybody has a function. I mean, if you're on a baseball team and you've got a guy that's a pitcher out there, well, he may want to go help in center field, but he just can't go help in center field because that's not what he's an expert in. So a lot of times you'll have folks that are very big-hearted and very well-meaning, and they go offer it, but by offering it, it creates another set of concerns for the incident managers that are there managing that situation. An example would be, I know right now in North Carolina, I heard on one of the news channels today that they're really in need of water. Well, that's great, but when you get 5 tractor trailers that show up one day with 5 tractor trailers of water, well, where are we going to put this water at? Where are we going to store this water? How are we going to disseminate it? So it all needs to be done in a process and a formal way of doing it. Another thing you'll see a lot of times is with donations. You always see local groups. I'm seeing them here in Franklin County now. Well, let's donate stuff for this storm. Well, that's great, and I want to encourage people to do that. But make sure what you're donating is what is needed. if you have a hurricane that comes through Jamaica and we're trying to send them 1,000 coats, that's probably not what they're going to need in Jamaica is 1,000 coats. We need to send what they need. The very best thing you can send is cash. Donate cash to the Red Cross or some other reliable organization and get it in there.
Billy, real quick on those, because that's where people's kind of at right now. When we say donating water and it needs to be a process, like what is that? Do we know? Is there an official chain that gets set up that says, all right, right here's where we can funnel all this through, and to where it gets to where it needs to go and it becomes part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Yeah, and thank you, Jeff, for that. The local, it's called a VOAD, and everywhere has a VOAD. It's the Virginia Organizations Active in Disasters. It's what they are. So they will manage the volunteers. They'll manage all donations coming in, whether it be monetary, food, or whatever. Some localities have their own VOAD. Some of them is regionalized, but every locality to some extent has a VOAD. If not, they will bring one in from another locality.
So in this situation, Billy, we would need to look up what that's called in North Carolina, right?
Right.
So
and I would think that the way to do that would be, let's just say that you and I wanted to get together off this call and we wanted to send, toilet paper and personal hygiene products and water to Asheville, North Carolina. Well, we would get word to our local emergency manager who would get it up to the state of Virginia, and then they would get it down to their counterparts in North Carolina. And then we would know what they needed, where to take it, how to take it, when to take it, and stuff like that. And it may take a day or two to do that. But, when I was out working a disaster, I just couldn't pick up the phone. I wasn't going to answer the phone if somebody from Charlotte, North Carolina called and said, hey, we got some water to bring you. I wasn't going to answer that phone. I didn't have time. Again, my emergency is local. So what they would have done is contacted the North Carolina Department of Emergency Management, who would in turn contacted the Virginia Department. It was spun back down that way. So I asked this, and please don't take offense if you're a volunteer that has a set skill that wants to go out there and help, but you have to go through the proper chains, and that's through the local statewide emergency management office who'll get it to locals who'll get it on down to where it needs to be. Just sit back and think a minute. If you get on FlightAware or even on X and look at all the air traffic with helicopters and stuff flying over top of Asheville, North Carolina. Well, can you imagine? They've got probably more airplanes flying over there, aircraft, than they do in O'Hare and Atlanta right now. Can you imagine the potential for something to happen and add to the disaster that's already there? Somebody's got to coordinate all that stuff. And that's why it needs to come down through the proper chains. And there's different sectors to do that. But for the we used to call it unsolicited volunteers. It's where the general public, good-hearted folks, they show up to help, and they're bringing in what they think you may need, which you very well may need, or you may not. One of the things that used to come to us a lot of times, and this is going to sound so cold and it's not going to come out right, but in today's world, you have to think about it, is we would always get a lot of food. Somebody would show up with 50 pizzas. Very rarely would we ever eat those 50 pizzas. Most of the time we would never open them. We would just set them off to the side, because in today's world, you never know where those pizzas are going to cause you to be food poisoned, whether accidentally or not. Had somebody done something nefarious to that, you just did not do that. So food is not a good thing to take into these. Now, if it's packaged food, it was bought, and when I'm talking about food, I'm talking about, where you go to McDonald's or Miss Smith baked a cake and brings it to you. You want to be really, really careful with that stuff. But the VOADs would manage that. They would manage the clothing. They would manage, the water that's coming in and how to distribute that out. And then you'd also have a logistics section. So again, I digress back. I think if you truly want to help, and what would get the best bang for the buck and not have you wasting your money and your resources and your time, is to get this stuff that you want to donate to professional organizations, Samaritan's Purse, the American Red Cross, God's Pit Crew. These are organizations that I am familiar with that do this stuff all over the country. And they're very well versed at what they do. And they know the process to make this happen. You know, it's not like, oh my God, I want to help and go there. But what happens then with that is a lot of it comes back, especially with people, Jeff, is is accountability. Whoever's the incident manager of this event in North Carolina or Georgia or where we're talking, they have to be they are being held accountable for everybody that comes there.
Yeah.
So, you know, how do you account for all these people if everybody's just coming in from everywhere, trying to help and trying to do great, but you don't even know who's there doing what? So I think the takeaway point is, and I will stop rambling, is that if you want to help, consider donating financially. And if you have some other resource that needs to be, then go through the proper chains. If it's Virginia, that's the Virginia Department of Emergency Management. In North Carolina, it's the North Carolina Department of Emergency Management. Reach out to those folks. If you don't know who those folks are, then reach out to your local fire chief or your city manager or county administrator, and they can direct you to who to reach out to. And I promise you that it'll go a lot smoother. It may take a little bit longer, but it'll go a lot smoother, and it will it'll be better utilized rather than, because a lot of these donations that people just take and leave, honestly, they end up in a landfill. Because they can't get distributed out in a timely manner to where they need to be.
I've heard that, and I think I think the bigger thing here too, being on all sides of this and working in the more of a civilian capacity now. But people, when they see this, we're exposed to media, we're exposed to social media, and we see this devastation immediately. It creates this call to action, and we never want to overlook that. And we always want to be appreciative to that. But I also know, being on the other side of sometimes the consequence that comes with, and it's not too much help. We don't want to put it like that, but help has to get into the same thing. But I don't know. What I was going to add to what you were saying is, people get really frustrated with the time of just where that response comes from, and there's somebody was sitting on their thumbs or whatever, but it seems like this thing still moves fast, and I don't know. I go back to, I think it was Katrina in New Orleans, and there was negative around the response or whatever, but we've gotten better about how we address that. We go from an emergency, what can we do, and then to this assessment phase and things along those lines. So I do you think, through all your incidents, you get better each time through your responses? Do we got a good system in place?
I think we have a good system in place, but I think the next time we have an emergency, we'll have a better system in place.
Better system.
And the next time we'll be better. Yeah. There'll always be learning points out there. And I want to go back to, you mentioned Katrina, and I mentioned it earlier, is all this stuff is spinning up. Katrina, the folks in Katrina took a big hit, especially at the state of Louisiana, and also the federal government, because New Orleans, and this came out in an after action report, they never asked for help till like 10 days into it. So again, it goes back. If a flood is coming through Franklin County tonight, and Franklin County never issues that declaration of emergency and asks for help, the help ain't coming. Because it cannot come until, first of all, the city or the county has to ask for it. Louisiana, the parish has to ask for it. Then the governor has to ask for it. And then the president has to authorize it. Now it comes. In some instances, a lot of this stuff was pre-placed. And it may have been 2 states over because they knew it was going to hit, but it couldn't come into Louisiana until the governor of Louisiana asked for it. Well, the governor couldn't ask for it till the mayor asked for it. So a lot of times that's what happens. A lot of people I think, pride themselves on being resilient, and we can take care of it. We don't have to ask for help. Well, I think we're getting better at doing that, and I think we're becoming more regionalized and knowing that I'm not here to take over your emergency. I just want to help. I think another good takeaway point here too is that may have people that really want to help but stand back and take a minute is what we're looking at in North Carolina and Tennessee and Georgia. It's not going to be fixed tomorrow. It's not going to be fixed Friday. It ain't going to be fixed 2 years from now.
Yeah.
So if you want to help, there's going to be plenty of time for you to help, and your help will be welcome. But this is not a 24-hour thing that, oh my God, we got to get the road cleared and all this, or we got to do that. You've got plenty of time to help. And so if you're concerned about, well, time I go through calling all these people that you said, and it gets back to me, oh my God, it's a week gone by. Well, like I said, that area is going to be affected for years. When did Katrina hit? Like 2004 or 5, something like that. I mean, you still see issues in New Orleans. I was in New Orleans in last November, and you can still see, issues that they're still having there that are from, and that's been 15, 20 years since that occurred.
Yeah.
And I see that happen. You've got interstates wiped out in North Carolina. That's a lot to put back. So point is that if you want to help, there's a place there for you to help, but just do it in the right way in a coordinated format with the state of North Carolina or the state of Virginia. Virginia's had some devastation also up in the Damascus area and 𝐬𝐵 and some of those areas farther out southwest. But reach out to those folks.
Yeah, no, you're right, and I want you hit it. I need folks to know this because this is two guys talking here, two guys with experience. But we're only this is a very, very overwhelming disaster that has occurred, and we're only a couple days into it. I wanted to talk to Billy on here just so people have that understanding of, you kind of over understanding of why there's a little bit of a process, because this is the point in time from the public safety side is, like you said, is stuff we can overwhelm our resources unintentionally. And everybody's heart is in the best place, and we never want to overlook just the helping hands that we are as people. And but I think that's what I really wanted to speak to is, if we don't at this point in time where we are removed into it, is if you can attach on to the processes, if you can attach on to your local fire chief and your emergency coordinators, take their advice on getting things responded, because they're probably in every community there's probably somebody coordinating some kind of effort of getting something, getting supplies, getting whatever the folks that may be need. But I think what we speak to here is where the folks are on the ground are communicating back with our emergency folks here in Virginia and in different localities. Hey, this is what we need, and then that's getting pushed down to the local levels to where folks are like, hey, if you're going to send something, do this. What I think it also helps people realize is it gives them, they know where their stuff's going. They know it's being used to help and not just ending up in nowhere, because that's what I think you folks don't realize either. If things just get left in like in a part, hey, here, y'all take this, and somebody's got to deal with it. And if we can coordinate it, the items and all the things that you want to give and all the goodwill you want to do is going to end up in the people's hands that need it the most. It's man, I appreciate you. This is it's definitely, I think you hit it. I think it's something that will live on, and we'll probably create another conversation in a couple of years on just how they recovered and what that looks like. But those we definitely want to keep those folks in our thoughts and our prayers and everything, because that community's got a lot of healing to do.
Well, you're absolutely right. You hit on one thing that I'd like to just kind of elaborate on a little bit, and how that all these pieces fitting into the puzzle, and how everybody has a job doing that. Communications has to be there. But there's people right now sitting in a command center somewhere in North Carolina that's figuring out that exit strategy. How, when all this is fixed, how are we going to get out of it? How are we going to get these roads fixed? What are we going to do when it gets fixed? How are we going to? So it's just like going into battle in the military. You've got to have the exit strategy there, because sometimes getting out of the emergency is hard. It's the hardest part. It's kind of like, I used to I'll use this as a crude analogy, but I used to play guitar with some guys, and I got where I was pretty good at it. But the part that I really was terrible at was ending the song.
Yeah.
I could play the guitar, I could play the chords, I could play the notes, but I didn't know when to stop. There's a format to that. And I think that's the same thing here is, that there's shelters being opened in North Carolina and Virginia, and I just use this as an example. But how do you pull the trigger to close that shelter? You will have people there that's living better in that shelter than they ever lived before in their life.
Yeah.
You're going to have homeless people that's living there. What is the strategy for getting out of that emergency? And I think there's people there still, like we talk about how this is a long process. You will see people in North Carolina 2 years from now that are still working on this emergency.
It's, and it's hard to give some parting advice on folks for preparedness, because I don't know that our friends in Western North Carolina were prepared, and because it hit with a lot of overwhelm, like a lot of our disasters do sometimes. So we weren't anticipating or what have you. And even in our area here is, where we're at, we're here in Central Virginia, and we're up to the mountains, and we don't experience a lot of tornado activity. Man, it was rocking through here with just alert after alert, and it created a lot of uncertainty. We're fortunate, way more than fortunate, than a lot of folks are, and I can't thank you enough for teaching all of us and helping all of us just kind of understand a little more about what these designations are and the process that we go through. And I think, like you said, is folks don't understand that localities just. I didn't know this either, Billy. As time went on, is we just don't. There's a process in place where you got to ask for help, and help has to be, and everybody has a part in that, and which creates sometimes a little bit of lag of. And the other thing I think we overlook is the amount of folks that are helping, and the resources that are being active that we're not seeing in media, we're not seeing in different settings, because they don't have the communications in place yet, and it's getting better. I saw where they're reestablishing their internet and things along those lines, which would be great. If someone's listening to this, Billy, and they're missing a loved one, or they're still are cut off from communications, is connecting with that state emergency office, saying, "Hey, I have a friend that lived in this area and I'm missing them." Is that the best way for them to go to try to reach into that to get information, or what's your suggestion there as we're wrapping up?
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. In any disaster, there will be a family reunification center set up that they will have people there to identify it. And once you contact your emergency manager, and he can get a hold of those folks, and they can get out to that family reunification center. That's tough for me to say, but get there, and they can certainly help you with that. I think that is the best way to go, because you don't want to go looking on your own, and now you potentially got another person out there that's lost or become injured or whatever. So reach out to the Family Reunification Center. And I don't know, Jeff, that, I don't have a problem with, and you may do it or you may not do it. If you give people my email address, and if there's anything I can do after we leave here to help them, because I have a lot of colleagues in a lot of states that, I may be able to connect you with, all right, here's who you need to call in Asheville or whatever. Again, the communications problems out there, I've got a friend that lives in Asheville, and I text them the last couple of days, and they haven't texted me back, and I gotta just naturally pray that they're not getting the text, not that there's something wrong. But yeah, just
Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. And folks, if you're listening, shoot me a direct message. If you've listened this far, I'll include that. Shoot me a direct message, and I'll connect you versus just putting your email into my feed there. That way I can make sure it's getting to where it needs to
Okay.
be. So you folks, you can comment. Let me know. I'll connect with you. We're open books with this stuff. If there's anything that Billy and I can do to help just get you in the right place and speaking with the right people. And if you have questions about this and just about this process, if make sure you reach out. Like I said, when I see it, I love to help educate because I know how ignorant I can be in a lot of processes sometimes. And then when someone comes along, it's like, yes, why we do it like it. I'm like, oh, I wish somebody had told me that. But all right, so that's just kind of the whole goal here today. Um, the Second Chance podcast is all about just listening. We talk about people's second chances, and we want to send as much positive vibes as we can to our friends down south. And anyone that's been affected by this storm, and we're pulling for their second chance and just in their recovery. So thank you, Bill. Appreciate you being on, brother.
Thank you, man.
Hey, Billy, real quick, tell everyone you're on LinkedIn. How can we find you? And I'll keep them to your email if you need that. But what's your LinkedIn?
I'm about to look that up just a second right here.
I'll tell you what I'll do. Billy will give it to me. I'll put it in the show notes and I'll tag him along the way there. But make sure you give him a follow, man. Recently retired and is going to make his way into a little bit of teaching and sharing stories as well. So
Absolutely. Appreciate the plug there.